Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's talk about Impact Wrestling. And now, of course, we're living in the era now that fans have returned to Impact Wrestling television, that Impact Wrestling is still taping television the same way that they taped television prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic, and that is having these big mammoth television tapings. But the issue is, of course, that with fans attending, they're going to report spoilers. So we've spoken about it before as to what we were going to do here on the channel when it comes to reporting these spoilers, getting into giving out information, giving out results, etc. And obviously when it comes to Impact News, there's a lot of news from these television tapings, especially when it comes to the backstage element of it, deals, how they came together, appearances, how they came together. We've come to the decision what we're going to do. We are going to talk about the spoilers, but what we're going to do, obviously you can see it on the screen right now. There's a big spoiler warning logo. We'll way ahead of time tell you that spoilers are going to happen and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to put timestamps on the video as well so that if you do want to skip stuff that is spoiler-centric, you can. I think that's the best way to do it. And obviously once these incidents air on Impact Wrestling television, we'll talk about them in depth as well. But when it comes to Impact Wrestling news, at the moment there's a lot of it. Coming off of the very successful Slammiversary pay-per-view on Saturday night, Impact Wrestling held their latest television tapings. As I mentioned, these were the first television tapings to be held in front of fans for over 16 months since March of 2020, and we saw a lot happen in that show. So the first thing we're going to talk about, of course, is a spoiler warning, sort of, even though Impact Wrestling themselves have put a video out about this on their YouTube channel, I think to get ahead of the spoilers that have been widely reported. But we'll give you the 5-second countdown, and then we'll talk about this big news story. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1... We're going to talk about it. So we're going to talk about it, little spoiler warning, and that is Chris Bay joining the Bullet Club. Yes, now as I mentioned, this is something that isn't too much of a spoiler, to be honest. It was initially, but then Impact Wrestling themselves teased this on their own YouTube channel and on social media. So this is, Impact Wrestling have already spoiled the surprise, if you will. They've hinted at it, and obviously it's going to happen at the latest set of Impact Wrestling television tapings. It's already happened, and it's going to be airing on Impact Wrestling television going forward, because former X Division champion Chris Bay has joined the Bullet Club. Now, this was first reported by Fightful Select, which of course is their Patreon service. Be sure to check that out. But Impact Wrestling tweeted a video yesterday of Chris Bay finding a Bullet Club t-shirt in his locker room. This was then followed by, at the Impact Wrestling television tapings over the course of the weekend, Chris Bay appeared to join the group by throwing up a Too Sweet sign with the leader of the Bullet Club, New Japan Pro Wrestling's Jay White, who of course made his Impact Wrestling debut this past Saturday at Slammiversary. Now, Bay wore one of the Bullet Club t-shirts after that segment. You can see the image right there, which of course is a big deal. Joining the Bullet Club, it's a massive deal for Chris Bay. It's huge. It's big for Chris Bay, and I think that's what's important here. Is we spoke about this before when it came to Impact Wrestling and the working relationship with AEW and New Japan, and people always said, what does Impact Wrestling get out of this? That was what people were talking about coming out of Slammiversary on Saturday night, was that realistically we're heading towards a match inside of an Impact Wrestling ring, which pits an AEW star against a New Japan Wrestling star, Kenny Omega, who of course is the Impact World Champion, but Kenny Omega versus Jay White, a New Japan Pro Wrestling talent. It's inside of an Impact Wrestling ring, but a lot of people said that's great for Impact if they can pull it off. That's a great event that they can promote and people will watch and people will be interested. It's certainly something that AEW would want to do, and even WWE would want to do. All the major pro wrestling companies in North America would want to be able to promote that match. So for Impact to do that, that's a big deal for them. But the criticism of some people have said, well, what does it do for the Impact Wrestling talent? Yes, it's great for Impact's business, but when it comes to talent, eventually Kenny Omega's going to go back to AEW, and eventually Jay White's going to go back to New Japan. So what does it do for the Impact Wrestling talent? Well, getting someone like Chris Bay involved in the Bullet Club, that's what it does for Impact Wrestling talent. That's realistically what it does. Now, at the recent set of Impact Wrestling television tapings, reportedly, Jay White came to the ring, cut a promo on coming to Impact. He reportedly is coming to Impact for David Finlay. Of course, as I mentioned, they've got their match next month for New Japan Pro Wrestling for that Never Openweight Championship. Talks about the Good Brothers and the Bullet Club, etc. Now, reportedly, Don Callis comes out to confront Jay White, which leads to the Good Brothers attacking him until, as I mentioned, Chris Bay making the save. So that's the situation. Chris Bay is fully, I guess, now a member of the Bullet Club. He also did team with Jay White to face off against the Good Brothers at the Impact Wrestling television tapings as well. Now, Chris Bay has also wrestled for New Japan Pro Wrestling over the course of the last year too, which is important to mention as well. So, look, anything when it comes to the Bullet Club and Jay White would obviously have to get approval from New Japan Pro Wrestling first. This isn't a case of Impact going into business for themselves now that they had Jay White's at their television tapings. New Japan obviously know Chris Bay because Chris Bay's worked their tapings before, so they're comfortable with Chris Bay being added to the Bullet Club. I think it serves all parties, and this allows future crossover for Chris Bay going forward in New Japan, whilst also maintaining a presence in Impact Wrestling too. Being associated with, one of the most dominating factions in New Japan history, but one of the most dominating and well-known factions just in professional wrestling in the last... when was the Bullet Club created? 2012, 2013? We're talking like the last 10 years. The Bullet Club's been New Japan Pro Wrestling's most dominant faction. Having someone like Chris Bay be involved in that is a massive deal for Chris Bay, and it's a massive deal for Impact Wrestling as well. So again, this is my point of when people were questioning how does it get over any of the Impact Wrestling talent having Jay White feud with Kenny Omega in Impact Wrestling, but it gets over the talent that Jay White takes under his wing. Jay White's giving the rub to someone like Chris Bay, and eventually when Chris Bay decides to split from the Bullet Club or the Bullet Club kick him out of the faction, you can have a Chris Bay versus Jay White match, which again puts over Chris Bay. If you're familiar at all with the channel here, if you're familiar with any of the videos I've done on Impact Wrestling and talking about Impact and working relationships with AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling, or just about the roster in general, I've been saying for a long, long time that I think Chris Bay is a world champion waiting to happen in Impact Wrestling. I think one of the things that maybe it was a little bit of a criticism of his work in the past was his ability to cut a promo, which I think has improved immensely. He even mentioned himself, I think it was on a comment of one of these videos, it was just a case of just give me an opportunity and I'll show you what I can do in terms of cutting a promo. And that's very true. That's very, very true. And that's something that sometimes I think with certain talents, it's kind of a criticism towards some people when they say, oh, they can't cut a promo. But then in reality, well, have we ever really heard them cut a promo? The answer is no. I think Chris Bay did excellent work during his feud with Rich Swann for the Impact World Championship last year. And if anything, I was critical of Impact's booking of Chris Bay during that feud with Rich Swann last year because I didn't like the idea of him losing and yet somehow still getting World Championships opportunities. It made him look weak going into it. What certainly didn't make him look weak was the match he had against Rich Swann, and I thought last year as well, I thought his X Division Championship reign was far too short. And I've been saying for a long, long time, the guy has something. He's got the look. Obviously, he's got immense ability in the ring. He's incredibly young as well. And it's great to see Impact Wrestling finally recognizing this and saying, look, whilst we're promoting Kenny Omega and Jay White eventually happening, we need to find ways of getting over our own talent. We need to find ways of putting over our talent. And whenever Jay White leaves and Kenny Omega leaves, we need to find a way of ensuring that our talent's ready to step into that void when they do eventually leave. Someone like Chris Bay, as I've mentioned, he can be a world champion in Impact. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So having the association with the Bullet Club, having him make appearances for New Japan going forward, which as a member of the Bullet Club, you would assume he would, it's a massive deal for Chris Bay and it's a massive deal for Impact Wrestling. And I think it does open the door for a future match against Jay White sometime in an Impact Wrestling ring too as well, which again is very exciting. Jay White, Chris Bay, that's a money match for Impact Wrestling. And I think it's interesting as well, now that we have crowds back and crowds returned at Slammiversary on Saturday, we can now start having discussions about people that are getting reactions and people that aren't getting reactions when they make their entrance at a television event, at an Impact Plus event, at a pay-per-view, whatever. And if you go back and watch that opener at Slammiversary on Saturday, that Ultimate X match for the X Division Championship, you'll see Chris Bay got a great reaction from that audience. They know his talents. They like what he can do in the ring. And this is a case of, for me, of Impact Wrestling going, right, let's push this guy to the moon. Let's make sure we get this guy over. Not that he wasn't over anyway, but let's have him do something circumstantial. So I think this is very exciting for Chris Bay, and excellent news for him and Impact Wrestling going forward. So we'll wait and see what it looks like when it airs on television. I thought the teaser was well done on Impact's social media accounts anyway. And as I mentioned, it's not much of a spoiler because Impact Wrestling have basically put that information out there that he is going to join. But this is the right way to go about it. And again, I think it silences some of the naysayers with the Kenny Omega Jay White thing of what does it do for Impact Wrestling? Well, that's the picture right there. That's what it does for Impact Wrestling. So I think that's a great deal. Now, another spoiler warning, because this is a spoiler warning. This isn't something that Impact Wrestling themselves have addressed on their social media or anything like that. And it refers to an AEW name who was initially backstage at the Impact Wrestling television tapings, but did later appear in a match during the taping. So once again, we'll give you the 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last minute spoiler warning, and that is AEW star and former Impact Wrestling star Frankie Kazarian appearing at the latest set of Impact Wrestling television tapings this past week. Now, it was first reported by Fightful, once again, Fightful Select, their Patreon service, that AEW star and former TNA wrestler, former X Division champion, former Impact Tag Team champion, was backstage at the latest set of Impact Wrestling television tapings, and he did indeed appear and work matches at the second set of Impact Wrestling television tapings as well, which again is a massive, massive deal. It's a huge deal for Impact Wrestling. It's a huge deal for AEW, but more for Impact Wrestling. Now, during these are the segments that Kazarian interrupted and appeared in. So Don Callis was out there. Again, this is another spoiler, so beware. He announced a number one contenders battle royal for the Impact Emergence Special. The winner, of course, will earn a World Championship opportunity against the current Impact World Champion, Kenny Omega. Now, Sami Callihan interrupted and cut a promo how he's going to win this battle royal, but he was interrupted by none other than the former Impact Wrestling star and current AEW star, Frankie Kazarian. Now, Kazarian attacked Kenny Omega and the Good Brothers. He did end up working a match, a 6-man tag team match in which he teamed with Eddie Edwards and Sami Callihan to go up against the Impact World Champion Kenny Omega and the Impact Tag Team Champions, the Good Brothers. Now, recently on AEW television, Frankie Kazarian has been doing the gimmick of the Elite Hunter, hasn't he? Of course. Now, he split up with Christopher Daniels. Bad Influence is no more. They're no longer, or was it SCU? Bad Influence shows my old school Impact Wrestling days. They're no longer a tag team, and Kazarian's kind of taking on a bit of a Punisher gimmick, which is interesting because Steve Macklin in Impact Wrestling also has a bit of a Punisher gimmick. But he's been hunting down members of the Elite, and he's going to try to take them out one by one, all that kind of stuff. That includes the Young Bucks, and it also includes, I guess now, Kenny Omega, which is why he's come to Impact Wrestling to take out Kenny Omega and take out the Good Brothers on their home turf, specifically the Good Brothers and, of course, Kenny Omega as well, who's the Impact World Champion. This is great. This is great. This is the exciting thing that I was mentioning and talking about when it comes to AEW talent and the AEW working relationship with Impact Wrestling going forward. I spoke about this a few weeks ago, and there has been a little bit of concern, I think, from Impact Wrestling fans recently of whenever Kenny Omega does drop the Impact World Championship, what happens to the AEW working relationship then? What does this mean? And I posed this question to Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful a couple of weeks ago because, once again, I was interested in this and I hadn't seen a lot of reports or discussions about it. And I said, what happens when Kenny Omega does eventually drop that Impact World Championship? Is the working relationship with AEW done? Is this just a temporary thing? Are we moving on? Are we going to something else? His response was that from what he had heard, there were no intentions, no plans of dropping the AEW and Impact Wrestling working relationship once Omega does indeed drop the Impact World Championship. And this is just another example of just that. And I think this is the best way of using this AEW and Impact working relationship. No disrespect to Frankie Kazarian or anything like that, but Kazarian's hardly a featured main player on AEW television right now. Yes, he does appear in the occasional segments where he's going after the Elite, but mostly he wrestles his matches on AEW Dark or AEW Dark Elevation. I'm sure he might appear on Rampage or something like that, but that's really his ceiling. He's a veteran at this point. It's a huge roster of talent in AEW. It's difficult for even someone like Kazarian to get on that show. I mentioned what's useful of having a working relationship between Impact Wrestling and AEW is that AEW can send talent that isn't being featured on their television, whether they are rookies, whether they are veterans, whether they're former Impact Wrestling stars. Lord knows there are so many talents on the AEW roster currently that used to work for Impact Wrestling. Kazarian's just an example of this. If they're not really doing all that much on AEW television right now, why not send them to Impact Wrestling? Why not send them to an Impact television taping over the course of a few days, and then suddenly they'll be on television for the next 6-7 weeks. Granted, it doesn't have the exposure of AEW. Granted, it doesn't have the viewers of AEW. Granted, it isn't AEW television. But also, it gives them exposure, it creates buzz on social media, and it helps out an affiliate of yours, that being Impact Wrestling. And given Kazarian's history with the company, as I mentioned, this is a guy that was with Impact for 10 years, maybe longer than that. and has really seen and done it all. The only thing he hasn't done in Impact Wrestling is be the world champion. Apart from that, he really has done it all. As I mentioned, multiple-time X Division champion, multiple-time tag team champion. He wrestled as Suicide for a period of time. He's done some crazy spots in some crazy matches. We saw Ultimate X return at the weekend at Slammiversary. Some of the most amazing spots in Ultimate X history have to do with Frankie Kazarian. I think back to him hitting the leg drop on Sheik Abdul-Bashir, and again, even later on in his Impact Wrestling career, I think of him in Fortune. I think of him with Christopher Daniels, his Bad Influence. This guy's got so much history, so it just feels right. It just feels right. It's a spot, again, that gets people talking on social media. Hopefully will drive up the ratings. I think it works well, as I mentioned, for AEW as well, because it gets one of their talents some hype. And also, from an AEW point of view, it continues their storyline that they're trying to tell on AEW television anyway. My only question would be is I don't really see how it ends, the Frankie Kazarian Elite Hunter storyline, because eventually it has to end. And I guess it ends in a match maybe against Kenny Omega, but Kenny Omega's winning that match. There's no way that Frankie Kazarian should be beating Kenny Omega, but why not have it on Impact Wrestling turf? Why not, it's better than, would it be the main event of Dynamite? I don't really know. Would it be the main event of Impact Wrestling? Absolutely, and it'd have some buzz about it. So I don't see a problem with that at all. If anything, once I saw that Frankie Kazarian was involved, I thought that was great. If anything, like I said, you've got so many former members of the Impact Wrestling roster that are currently signed to AEW that maybe aren't being featured every single week on Impact Wrestling, on AEW television rather. So send them to Impact, and suddenly they become a focal point of the show for the next 6 weeks. Again, it can help put over the talent that's there in the Impact Wrestling roster exclusively to them, or, if anything, it just helps the ratings, which Impact Wrestling does need right now. So I had no problem with that, and I'm very excited to see, once again, how it plays out on Impact Wrestling television. Another thing we do want to talk about, no spoiler warning here, is Kenny Omega has been talking about Jay White and talking about the confrontation that closed Slammiversary this past Saturday. Now, Impact World Champion Kenny Omega, of course, retained his championship against Sami Callihan in a violent, no disqualification match at Slammiversary on Saturday night. Now, while celebrating after the match with Impact World Tag Team Champions The Good Brothers and Don Callis, his manager, New Japan Pro Wrestling star and Bullet Club leader Jay White made his Impact Wrestling debut. He was carrying the Never Openweight Championship. White got into the ring as the others inside of it offered him a too sweet hand gesture. The show came to a close with White considering his options, which was the plan all along. Again, so let's remove any idea of it was a botch, all that kind of stuff. It was a cliffhanger. That was exactly what Impact Wrestling wanted and aimed to do. Now, on social media over the weekend, a fan posted a video of Omega and White's biggest match to date at the New Japan Pro Wrestling New Beginning in Sapporo event in 2018 for the IWGP United States Heavyweight Championship. Of course, Jay White ended up pinning Omega and taking the championship away from him in that match. Now, this is what Omega had to say about the match when the clip was surfacing on social media. He said, quote, "Not denying the loss or anything, but we don't need to revisit this. It was a one-time thing, that's it." Now, going by this response, it would appear that Kenny Omega is looking for some form of solidarity with Jay White, but it'll have to be seen how Switchblade responds to Kenny Omega in the coming weeks on Impact Wrestling television or on AEW television as well. Which is interesting. Now, a lot of people have looked at this in a couple of different ways. One, you could look at it as when he's saying it was a one-time thing, that's it. People are saying that means that Kenny Omega's trying to get back into the Bullet Club or get back into the good graces of Jay White. I kind of looked at it from a different direction. I looked at Kenny Omega basically sort of carrying away from Jay White and basically saying, I don't want to face this guy again. This guy was good, and I don't want to lose. He's saying, yeah, I admit I lost before, but that was it. We don't need to revisit this. And it's just sort of a subtle way of Kenny Omega playing up the heel of going, we don't need to revisit this. I'm the best in the world, but people would say, well, if you're the best in the world, why can't you beat Jay White? And he'd be like, I don't need to. It's just kind of subtle stuff like that, which I think is really interesting. Now, we haven't really heard anything else about, what the plans are for Omega and Jay White, what the plans are for Omega and White in Impact Wrestling. Do Impact Wrestling have any matches planned for them? Or are we going to see a main event of Bound for Glory, for instance, of Jay White versus Kenny Omega for the Impact World Championship? How the deal came together. The only thing we've really heard when it comes to Jay White and Kenny Omega is the stuff that's happened at the Impact Wrestling television tapings over the course of the last few days, and the news that Impact Wrestling did everything possible to keep it as a surprise at Slammiversary, which of course it was. He wasn't even featured on the run sheet, Jay White. It was just listed as a pull-apart brawl and all that kind of stuff. So Impact Wrestling knew this was a big surprise, and let's be honest, they played it really, really well. So credit to them, but Kenny Omega's already carrying away from Switchblade, which I think is fascinating to see. Finally, we have one more thing, and once again, there's a spoiler warning about this, so we'll give you the 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Final spoiler warning. And that is an update on Deonna Purrazzo, her status for NWA Empowerrr, and her opponent for NWA Power. You can see it there. Now, this was reported by Fightful. Fightful Select, once again, their Patreon service. Be sure to check it out. Fightful posted the following reports over the weekend, and it said, quote, as we saw recently, Kylie Rae was granted her Impact Wrestling release to pursue the National Wrestling Alliance, and Thunder Rosa served as the mystery opponent for Deonna Purrazzo and the Knockouts Championship at Slammiversary on Saturday. Fightful has learned that as of this weekend, Mickie James actually isn't the planned opponent for Deonna Purrazzo going forward, I guess, at the NWA Empowerrr events. The working plan over the last week has been for Purrazzo to face Melina at the event, former WWE Women's Champion Melina at the event, with the Mickie feud building for a hopeful match down the line. So it would appear that Mickie James, once again, isn't going to actually be working a match at the NWA Power event, but Impact Wrestling hopes that they can do a Deonna Purrazzo versus Mickie James match eventually. I have no doubts in my mind they will do a match eventually. Obviously, Mickie James showed up to promote the NWA Power event, to invite Deonna Purrazzo to the NWA Empowerrr event. That's why she was there, but it was also there to sow some seeds, lay some foundations for a possible Deonna Purrazzo Mickie James match in the future. I think Impact would want that to happen inside of an Impact Wrestling ring. I think Mickie James is just doing the tour to get as many people interested, excited, and hyped for the NWA Empowerrr event. As far as Deonna Purrazzo versus Melina, Melina is still working with the NWA. She still does have a contract with them. I think she has been doing NWA Power tapings still. Look, in terms of a legendary and well-known women's wrestler who's achieved a lot over the course of the last 20 years or so, of course, Melina is a name. Former women's champion multiple times. Is her fame, status, and celebrity as big as it once was? Of course it isn't, but she's still a legendary figure. And when there were rumors and reports that Melina was going to return to WWE last year, there was lots of excitement and hype about that, once again, because she's a legendary and well-known figure. And if Deonna Purrazzo faces Melina at NWA Empowerrr, there's no doubt in my mind Deonna Purrazzo wins that match. I think she probably wins it relatively emphatically. Let's be honest, she beat Thunder Rosa in about 10 minutes at Slammiversary on Saturday. So I think Deonna Purrazzo will do the same to Melina. And I guess it's just another way of putting over Deonna Purrazzo. It's another way of making Deonna Purrazzo feel like a big name, feel like a big star, and making sure everyone knows this is one of the best female wrestlers in the world today. This is one of the most established women's wrestlers in the world today. And I think if you pitch it to Impact Wrestling in this way, not that they care because they want to work with all of these promotions. They want to work with the NWA. They want to work with MLW. They want to work with Ring of Honor. They want to work with all of these companies. I think if the NWA pitched it as, we want to have Deonna Purrazzo for Empowerrr, they would say, okay. And they would say, we want her to work with Melina and we want Deonna Purrazzo to win. Why wouldn't Impact Wrestling go for that? They would say, absolutely. Because it puts over our talent. It makes our champion look strong, and it makes our champion look like one of the best female wrestlers in the world. She beat Thunder Rosa. She beat Melina. She's beat all of these knockouts on the Impact Wrestling roster. And eventually, she will beat Mickie James as well. Because why? That puts over Deonna Purrazzo, and it makes Impact look bigger. It makes Impact look better, and by proxy, it makes Deonna Purrazzo look better. And she is one of the best female wrestlers in the world today. There's no doubt about that. So it's an interesting proposition. I don't think it's a match people were super crying out for. Nobody was saying, oh, I really want to see Deonna Purrazzo versus Melina. But, you know, it's an interesting match. It's a big-time opponent. And, look, Impact Wrestling are going to be all for it. But, look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all these Impact Wrestling news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. It really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings, and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to WrestleNews365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right-hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.